Hi, everyone. It's Stephanie with a patient story, back again with Barbara. And Barbara, thank you so much. You just went through a lot. Your first symptoms in early 2020 and the path of getting to your first line treatment, which was R-CHOP, some bumps along the way. And what I love too, with you talking about the hair loss and dealing with the notion of being sick with kids, especially very young ones. So thank you for that. And now we're going to go into, unfortunately, you go through all this treatment, the best result is just to stay in remission. You had PET scans periodically to check. And in December, you had both a PET scan and then you had a biopsy that showed an active tumor in the abdomen area. And so I wanted to ask, what was that reaction, I guess? I mean, how did you learn about this and how did you process it?
Well, my oncologist, of course, was doing periodic PET scans. In December, I started again feeling kind of abdominal pain. At first I kind of thought, oh, well, it's just stomach cramps. I mean, I knew better. It was like I was just put in the back. I just didn't want to deal with it. But then when the PET scan showed that it was positive there and that we needed to try another course of treatment, I guess my biggest reaction was disappointment. It's just really disappointed. I mean, I wasn't losing hope, but on the other hand, the reality of things kind of hit me.
I like that you're making the distinction. It wasn't that you felt hopeless, but there was, of course, a sense of great disappointment. Like, I thought that this was behind me. I want to be done with this. And now here we are. Yeah. Another setback, a big one. And so at that point, what were those next steps? You went back to the same hematologist, oncologist, and what did he say was the next step?
Well, actually, they thought the next step would be stem cell transplant. And they gave me some chemotherapy. They do that before stem cell. There's protocols with getting a stem cell transplant. And you need to be actually cancer-free before you do get the transplant. And I didn't reach that goal. So they said they offered me the CAR T, which they were actually more enthused about. It's just that the medical community, insurance, blah, 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 they want you to go through stem cell transplant first. And since I didn't qualify, my doctors were excited that they could offer me the CAR T.
I imagine it was an autologous stem cell transplant. They were going to collect from you, and then that was going to be the process. Unfortunately, you still had that active cancer in the PET scan the next month, and that said so no more stem cell transplant. But that did open the door, like you're just saying, to our T-cell therapy, which has been a bright light in lymphoma treatment. When your doctor was first introducing CAR T, how did he describe it to you and what that would mean for you?
Well, he described it pretty thoroughly, and I did have some background in hematology. I was a laboratory medical technician for my career. So I understood T cells, antibodies, the basics of blood cells. And it made sense. I understood it seemed astronomical that they had come up with this, solution, that all the studies and the work that went behind it. But it was pretty amazing, the whole idea of it.
It's interesting. I didn't know about your background there in the lab, but that must have given you an extra understanding of what this meant, the engineering of the T cells, and then putting it back into your body to fight the cancer more on target. And you actually had said you went to an immunology oncologist, so someone who specialized in this,
Yes,
talk about the CAR T. Is that right?
yes. Actually, the same cancer center has a Fred Hutchinson Research Center, and they were heavily involved in the CAR T and had a whole suite um, that Jeff Bezos actually donated the money for CAR T, for CAR T suite, and their own doctors. So I
Wonderful.
sort of left the care of my regular oncologist, and I was now in the care of the CAR T research scientist oncologist.
So you felt, I'm sure, pretty good, right? You're in the hands of people who clearly have experience in this. They're
Right.
specialists, and I think that's great that you got that care, Barbara. And so, explain to us. I think a lot of people have heard about CAR T. They've seen doctors talk about it, but are curious about what the human experience is. Okay, you've been told you're going to have CAR T. So, can you walk us through what that meant, starting with the preparation, including the tube that had to be in your neck?
Right. Um, First of all, they go over side effects very thoroughly, which is a little bit scary because, there can be some life-threatening side effects. Um, and then the fact that we lived more than an hour from the hospital that I was going to also required us to live closer, which was quite an expense, to rent an apartment in Seattle for 1 month.
Barbara,
And
what was the requirement in terms of how close you had to be?
you had to be 15 minutes from the hospital, which would have been University of Washington, because the reaction you get as soon as you get a fever, they want you there right away. It's like life threatening. So,
And do you remember that temperature as soon as you had, was it any fever, like 99, or was it a particular number?
oh, I think it was like 100.3 or something. I can't remember exactly. It was a low, what you would consider a low temperature, but no, you got that temperature and you're in the emergency room. So that happened, and I spent a week in the hospital there. They closely monitored me. Of course, that's after I got the T cells, so I need to back up a little bit. Um, so the process of removing your T cells, they can do it with veins in your arm if you're young, healthy, have huge veins in your arm. But unfortunately, I didn't. So they put I think it's a hooker tube in your neck, which again was a procedure, but not a real painful procedure. It was short, didn't take long. It was awkward, is all I can say about it, because you've got this tube sticking out of your neck, and you have to have it there like overnight. So I just slept on the couch with pillows propping my head up and managed to get some sleep. Um, and then it's sort of like a kidney, um, where they transfer your blood through a machine. They actually take your blood cells out, goes through a machine. It takes removes your T cells, and then puts your blood back in. And it's an all day process. And the nurse that does it is highly trained. So, it is a complicated process. I didn't have any problem with it. It's just that it took a long time, and you were hooked up to this machine, so you couldn't leave. I think they did bring me a bedside commode at one point, but it's not like you can get up and go to the bathroom or anything. So, and then it takes quite a few weeks. They sent my cells to New Jersey, where they were processed, And I think it took quite a few weeks. I can't remember exactly, like at least 4 weeks. And then they came back and it's just a little tiny bag and they put the cells back in you, and it's just an easy process there.
Can you refresh too? So how many hours did it take to remove the T cells, and how much time did it take for the infusion to put them back in?
Oh, it seemed like an all-day process, at least 6 hours to remove the cells. The receiving the cells back was maybe half hour. It was no time at all.
You get the T cell infusion. It's 30 minutes or so, and then how are you feeling after that?
You feel fine. I didn't notice anything. It just, no problem.
That's so great. And I know that lasted for about a week where you seemed to be okay, but then about a week later, you did develop a fever. And by the way, how long do they say they need you to be close by to the hospital?
Like 15 minutes.
Right. For how long? Like, was the monitoring period?
How long was
When they want you to be close by because they're worried that you're developing a fever.
right after? Yeah. Once you receive those T cells, you want to be that close to the hospital.
And
Yeah.
did they say, we need you to, after you receive your T cells, we need you to be 15 minutes or less away for a week, for 2 weeks,
month,
a month?
a month. And then you see the team in the CAR T once a day.
Daily for a month?
Yeah. Well, Monday through Friday.
Right,
Yes.
right. Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah.
And what were they
And
doing at these visits?
vital signs. They did mental cognitive test, ask how I was feeling. They were short visits, but no, they wanted to see you in person.
So vitals, so meaning your temperature, your blood pressure, maybe oxygen levels.
Right.
And then in
And
terms
they
of,
did COVID tests
oh yes,
once a week. Once a week.
I forgot you had the added bonus of COVID tests throughout
Right.
all of this.
Yeah.
So Barbara, when they gave you the test for checking, the mental status and making sure the cognitive was there or cognition was there, what kind of, were they just asking you, do you know what year you're in? Count the alphabet?
It was more like you wrote the same thing down every day. You'd think I would remember that, but I can't. But you just wrote the same thing every day. You could see it written, and you had to write underneath the same phrase. You're just copying what's written on the page because they can tell with your handwriting if it's shaky.
You get the infusion,
Yeah.
you go in Monday through Friday every day for a month, and they want to make sure that everything is in order. And about a week later, you did develop a fever, and so you did have to be hospitalized. Now, was that fever, it was a noticeable one that was at home, or was it during one of those visits? They're like, oh, you have a high temperature.
No, it was when we were at our apartment.
Okay.
And my husband was just fanatic about checking my temperature. And he said, oh, okay, we're going, And arrangements had been made for when I got the temperature, and it all went really smooth. And they put me up in the oncology ward at the hospital.
And really, the fever wasn't too bad. It was just for monitoring, and you were okay.
Exactly.
And so you were released.
I did get, while I was in the hospital, I had a couple of days of chills. So I think my temperature probably got higher there because I remember the chills really bad. And they subsided, but they did keep me there for the full 8, I think it was 7 or 8 days.
Obviously, with something like this, they want to make sure that everything is.
Well, it's a little boring to be in the hospital for 7 or 8 days when I didn't really feel that bad, once the chills and the fever went away. But it was comforting to know that they were watching me that closely.
We hear with like clinical trials, for instance, too, you know, you're under a microscope and there's a double-edged sword there. It's, you have to go through a lot more, but at the same time, you're under a lot of supervision and care. So I think it's an
Right.
interesting sort of experience. So then, Barbara, after all this, you get PET scans still. They show a positive result, but then biopsies show a negative result.
Actually, the doctors were a little, wondering what was going on. They couldn't give me an answer. They couldn't give themselves an answer. Apparently, the CAR-T oncologist said, well, sometimes you can get false positive with CAR-T. It's a fairly new cancer procedure. They don't know everything about it, and they admit that. So they were a little hesitant, well, actually, I think I had 2 biopsies. It ended up with 2 biopsies. And finally, just before, I was feeling fine. I mean, I couldn't even feel what was still positive. Just so I was, and at one point, my doctor said, well, let's just see in 6 months. So I was thinking, well, that's great, But then he called just before Christmas, and said he just couldn't get it out of his mind. He was a little concerned and thought, what if he's not doing the right thing? So he had spent a lot of time, him and his colleagues, thinking about it, and decided that I should go through radiation therapy for the month of December, which kind of, ruined my Christmas plans, but and I was disappointed again, and he gave me a choice. This is just how we feel about it. It's up to you. And which I kind of don't like when they do that, because those are hard decisions. And my husband and I talked about it and thought, well, if they are wondering and worried, then that kind of makes me feel the same way. Like he said, maybe it won't change anything. Maybe it will. So I went ahead and did it.
Okay. What I'm hearing is that you really want to understand maybe your options, but you want your doctor to give you more of a backing of, well, this is what I would do, given these options.
Yes, and that's hard for them to do. They can't really do that. And he didn't have any answers because they were confused about, the
Results.
biopsy report compared to the PET scan report. And so they were just trying to cover all the bases.
So again, you had these lymph node biopsies, 2 of them. You also had 2 accompanying PET scans, and both times the PET scan showed positive results, the biopsy was negative, and that was the conundrum. So you agreed to do radiation because it just felt like, well, if there's concern that he and his colleagues are expressing, I feel like maybe I should be concerned, and I'll just play it safe, as opposed to, because it is a big deal, right, Barbara? You want to, like you said, it ruined your Christmas plans. And I think for other people who haven't been in this position yet, it might seem like, well, obviously you just do the treatment, but there's more that goes into that decision making, right? Can you share anything more about what you were weighing there?
Well, it was like I just wanted to get on with my life. So, but on the other hand, I thought, well, I don't want to just shorten my life. How do I know? There, so we just don't know. And I tend to be more cautious. So I decided that we did discuss it. I think we made the decision that night, my husband and I. And of course, he's getting worn out driving me to Seattle every day because we need to get in commuter lane and it's winter weather. And it's like, oh my gosh, we just don't want to do this, But we just knew the possible consequences. versus that maybe no consequences. It was like hard to do.
Yeah, it's a very personal decision, and that discussion you had is it could only be a decision made by you and by him. And by the way, to be clear, it was the mass was again in the abdomen. That's why the lymph node biopsy was taken there. And I just want to make it clear for people who are watching and reading that's where the radiation was. It was on that mass in the abdomen
Yes.
area.
Yes.
And was it Monday through Friday?
Yes.
And it looks like it was for about what, like 6 weeks or so. It was for about a month and a half.
Right. Yeah.
How was that? Describe going in for radiation, and like you said, you had to go in every day.
The worst part was actually getting there. Like I said, it was winter, and traffic in Seattle is not pleasant. We're like north of Seattle. So, but as far as the radiation, you just get on a table, they line you up, and it doesn't take long at all. Because it was in my abdomen, I had side effects of diarrhea, which again, I dealt with that with the antidiarrheal medicines. But that was a little unpredictable and unpleasant. But other than that, and I also got fatigue from that. Yeah.
Barbara, you go through radiation. It's about 6 weeks or so. You get a PET scan. It's January 18th of 2022. And unfortunately, again, first of all, waiting for the results. By this time, you've had to wait for a lot of results, but scanxiety is a very big issue for patients and for caregivers. How did you get through these bouts of waiting?
Well, I think it was harder on my husband, to tell you the truth. But you just kind of picture yourself where things are fine, and then all of a sudden you're picturing yourself, well, this is it. So it's like a teeter-totter. You're down, you're up, you're down, you're up. It's like you just can't seem to be in the middle. But and I'm a realist. I'm one of those people that, okay, tell me everything, I can handle it. If it's going to be this way, it'll be that way. I mean, but I do set myself up for the worst, it seems, more than which my husband says I need to be more of an optimist. But anyway.
It's a tough struggle, right? I actually felt that struggle with me and my husband too when I was going through treatment, where he wanted me to be more of an optimist. And I felt I don't want to set myself up for that. I don't want to go up and then come back down. I'd rather just stay right here.
I mean, I always have a plan B, but CDEF plan is like you kind of like, how many plans can you have?
Coming up on the last segment of our conversation with Barbara on her diffuse large B-cell lymphoma experience, we talk about the next treatment decisions she and her doctor made, including whether she should go through CAR T-cell therapy again or try a clinical trial. That's next on The Patient Story.